jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's the jacked up review show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show.
Thank you for making it to this three-part episode.
Oh, happy to be here.
Ryan Luis Rodriguz, everybody, of formerly the Coolness Chronicles, and
Not formerly. I'm still there.
oh, you're still. Yeah, I thought you were wrapping it up. My bad. We'll see. I got it.
Well, it'll still go on. It'll just be about different things.
Oh shit, and also of not for screen Reels of Justice.
Yes.
I almost said for Screen and Country, which is a totally different one.
I can be on that one too. That's okay. I don't know who those people are, but I can be on their show.
Nathan and Brendan of who collaborate with Home Video Hustle and have the What Were They Thinking podcast. Brendan goes into his British alter ego Montrose, and they decide to go for the review every British best movie of all time, list by list.
And I guess somebody CGI'd me into their podcast. That's cool. Like George
There you go.
Lucas.
Yeah, there you go. I couldn't let a good thing go. And this time it was an edit we didn't mind.
I shot first, by the way. I want to make that clear to everybody. It was not Greedo.
All
It
right.
was me.
Well, I mean, at least this is a compromise we can agree on, as opposed to a Ridley Scott director's cut that doesn't really make too big a difference. Oh.
Hey, it's daytime now in that shot. What are you talking about? That makes all the difference.
Right.
It's a different movie now. I have to give it a whole half of a star more. I mean, it's daytime.
It's
That's
daytime.
crazy.
There was 5 more scenes of him telling someone he's going to conquer their kingdom. That so made a difference in the narrative flow. Thank you, Ridley. Thank you.
God bless.
At least Michael Mann had the decency to change up some of Al Pacino's overacting in Heat.
And at least when he edits his movies, he doesn't tell us about it. He just springs it on us
Yeah.
and lets us try to figure out, wait a second, this movie's different. And he'll have to say, no, it isn't. I know what you're talking about. Same
Right.
movie.
Yeah, I didn't put an unrated blurb at the top of that. That was marketing.
So what if I've released Ali 3 times and it's a radically different movie? I won't tell you about it.
Now you make me want to rewatch it. Oh. So, speaking of Michael Mann and crime movies as the perfect segue into Breaking Bad, and were you part of the Netflix crowd, or did you see it first?
I'm OG.
There you
I go
go.
back to season 2 because when the pilot aired on AMC, I watched about maybe 5 minutes of it, and I thought, nah, not for me. And it was a short season. I think it's only like 7 episodes.
Yeah, it's
and
like 8. Yeah.
By the time it was over, I started hearing about how good it was. So I put this is back when Netflix was mostly DVDs. I put the first season in my queue, and then I watched it maybe the day before season 2 started. And from that point on, I was watching every episode the week that it aired.
Nice.
Like, instantly obsessed. Once I got like maybe 2 episodes in, I realized, okay, this is something special. This is like, it's not similar to Mad Men in any other way than it's like a drama, but in that you want to know what's going to happen to these characters next and what terrible, terrible things they're going to do.
Exactly. I've hit on how this doesn't feel like it's trying to even be influenced by anything else. I mean, there's plenty of other shows like Oz and Sopranos that make this show possible to be even aired, but
Yeah.
it's definitely not reliant on those. It's its own special recipes, pun intended.
Yeah, those like Oz really it does not get a lot of credit, but it did kick open that door like with a vengeance. And
Yeah.
then The Sopranos was like, okay, well, what if we did Oz, but we made it look like a movie? Like you were watching it, and if you didn't know what the show was and you just saw a random image, you would have to think,
Exactly.
is that a movie or is that a TV show? And that's how we got to basically the situation that we're in now, where movies and television look pretty much alike.
Yeah,
And
and it amazes me to no end how everyone's still there's still just this prejudice is like, nah, I don't have time for TV. It's like, well, if you have time to marathon a bunch of movies, I think you have time for TV. But
yeah,
whatever.
like now, TV is just longer movies that are split up into chapters.
Right, 13 hours.
I mean, with the obsession of like the Queen's Gambit, it's clearly, I mean, it's billed as a miniseries, but really it's a movie that has 7 parts.
Exactly, and I mean, you would think that with Scott Frank, screenwriter of Get Shorty,
Out of Sight.
Out of Sight, The Lookout, and the Liam Neeson movie.
A Walk Among the Tombstones.
Yes, the talking about the end of the '90s era. Just you would think they could even advertise that, but they didn't really do that. They were just kind of like, hey. Remember that one actress who's in all these other movies, Anne Taylor-Joy? Okay, she's in it. Boom, watch it.
Yeah. And I mean, he's the guy who did Searching for Bobby Fischer, and they didn't even put that in the ad.
That
From
was
the
what
guy
was-
who knows chess, watch this show about chess. They didn't even do that. That's crazy.
You would have thought they would have jumped on it, but like you say, it seems like the viewers are more creative than some of the advertisers. It's like they'll go to the first thing on their resume, like the first high build movie on IMDb or Fandango, and they just go on that as opposed to, wait a minute, he or she was already in this kind of movie. Why don't you target that crowd or demographic? And it's like, no.
And it helps that like Netflix content distribution model is basically just like a BM, where every 2 days here's a show, here's another show, and you're like, I guess I'll watch it. I have nothing better to do. I'm in sheltering in place. Yeah, sure, I'll watch this, and then you watch it, and it turns out to be amazing.
Right.
But you don't even have to like really like tell people, hey, you got to watch this. You just got to put something else on the menu, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not going anywhere. I'll watch this next.
The truth could not be better said, because I mean, they even still have this show. They'll never give it up. They'll never give up the license to air it. They know.
Oh no,
many
the
people.
originals will be there until Netflix implodes, which is about 5 years from now. But don't tell them that. They don't know.
Shh.
They're not aware that the bubble will burst, but that's okay. We'll tackle that when we get to it.
Yeah, and I mean, where else are you going to be able to catch up on your AMC shows when they can't even bother to keep it up on regular cable on demand for that long? So, I mean,
Or when cable goes away.
oh, there
we
you
don't
go.
even have the option anymore, and now we have to go to internet providers and pick our favorite streaming services.
Right. And then when those go away, then you're going to have to find the bootleg sites. And then when the bootleg sites finally get shut down, where are you going to go then? Oh.
And we'll have to outrun the zombies in the streets and, all that fun apocalyptic stuff. It's all coming, folks.
There
It's gonna
you
be
go.
great.
There's going to be the DVD corner, the Blu-ray corner, and then there's going to be the VHS guys.
A lot of trash can fires. Because apparently, according to all dystopian movies, trash can fires are everywhere.
Right. We couldn't find a better way to make you fear the apocalypse, so we just gotta have something on fire in the background. And speaking of fires, holy shit. This is a kind of show that basically the casting could not have been better. It made me totally change my retrospect on some of the actors who I thought were okay, but always playing the same, awful villains or bad guys. I'm speaking of Dean Norris and Jonathan Banks, and then you got again Giancarlo Esposito and Bryan Cranston, who have been around for years but weren't entirely known. Giancarlo had been in the drug trafficking movie Fresh, and
a lot of
Bryan
Spike Lee movies.
Yeah, lots of Spike stuff. Trading Places as Eddie Murphy's cellmate, Usual Suspects, and it's so wild how Bryan Cranston comes off Seinfeld and Malcolm in the Middle.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was the joke when the show came out. That you're gonna have the dad from Malcolm in the Middle cook meth, and that joke lasted for maybe about 6 months, and then people actually saw the show and they're like, okay, this isn't implausible anymore. Yeah,
right.
We buy it. He's a bad man. We get it.
Especially because there's just no relation to the character. I mean, yeah, he's a dad, but he might as well be a bastard because I mean,
the two things they had in common is that they're both in their underpants in the pilot, but that's the only thing that they have in common.
There you go. And
yes, I am paying attention to Bryan Cranston's underpants.
Oh Jesus!
I see you, baby. I see you.
James Lipton definitely talked about it way too long on his episode of Inside the Actors Studio. I was like, I get it, James. We've all seen the pilot. Also, it's wild how, I mean, more or less, I've talked in all the other previous chats about this as well as off the show, and how so many comedians eventually get to prove themselves just beyond invaluable in a dramatic role, and how the original choice was Matthew Broderick. And I was kind of glad that they both not only decided to not go with Ferris Bueller and have that preconception, but also avoided someone as awesome as Robin Williams, because again, it allowed you to go in blind and not have this, make even a chance to make jokes about the person's previous roles and all that.
Yeah, and there was a rumor that John Cusack had passed on it.
Oh,
really? Apparently, that's not true.
Yeah.
He had to confirm that later on. But I mean, like, if Matthew Broderick were in the role, I could see it being interesting. I don't know that it would have been as successful, but like, you see him in stuff like Election, and that he has this undercurrent of darkness in him. And the fact that, he accidentally killed 2 people in a car. But,
I was just waiting for you to make that joke.
But with John Cusack, you have, like, I guess the comment would be, hey, Lloyd Dobler's cooking meth. And it would be like, okay, whatever. But, he played an assassin in Grosse Point Blank. And it's kind of like a natural progression. He has comedy, but he also has the darkness.
Cusack would have definitely been an interesting comeback for him, because he was already, always just in demand, but it would have definitely been intriguing to see him kind of see whether he would have gone all maniac with the role, or whether he would have, like you say, just been kind of done his more of his subtle, just comedic mannerisms.
Yeah, I don't know which John Cusack would come to play exactly, because we have 2 kinds of him now, where he's in the crazy-ass movies doing crazy-ass performances, and then you have the traditional John Cusack. I don't know who would have exactly been playing that role, but it could have been interesting. I'll say that.
As long as he's not in a decent movie giving a crazy performance as Richard Nixon in The Butler, I think it'll work.
Oh, I haven't even seen it. Is he crazy in that?
It's one of those is like, who did the casting on this movie?
Well, now I want to see it.
I think you'll like it in a Forrest Gump kind of way, but at the same time, it is one of those is like,
better or worse than Anthony Hopkins as Nixon?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Talk about a guy who should not have been playing Richard Nixon. Anthony Hopkins.
There you go. Rob, who you've met on the show before, was already like, yeah, he shouldn't have even been playing Van Helsing. It's definitely an interesting one, because it's like, he's another one that doesn't ditch his accent, and yet people love it so much, and at the same time you're like, I still got an issue with the accent. So with this show, you got so many people, they didn't really have too many misconceptions or pre-prejudice against them taking on the role, but at the same time you wonder, okay, I've seen him play a bad guy before, what will be different? So Jonathan Banks, I thought, okay, Beverly Hills Cop, he can probably only do those kind of one-dimensional, kill ya roles, and it's like, no,
He's awesome. Oh, so good. He's an Airplane too,
I forgot about
and not Airplane 2, but Airplane
as
also.
well. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah. And just I gotta hand it to everybody, and you can tell how this got him the role on other stuff like Community, and just everybody gets a second chance. Is like, now welcome to the third stage of your career.
Yeah, it's kind of a redemption, not because they did anything bad, but because it reinvigorated them in a way that now you can say the actors' names, and before it would be, oh, that character actor, I know their face, I probably can't actually tell you their name though. And
Yeah.
now they have this robust career, multiple Emmys. It's one of the single greatest cast shows in the last 20 years, if not of all time. Everybody is so perfectly chosen.
It especially helps that, a lot of them had encountered each other somewhere along the way because, LA, small town.
Yep.
And like Giancarlo Esposito had previously been a victim killed by Aaron Paul in an episode of Ghost Whisperer.
I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, he said it in an interview and showed the photo. I was like, oh, no way. And, and of course, the creator, had written for X-Files long term and then had done the episode that Cranston was cast in as a man who thinks his head is about to explode, literally. So it's just one of those. It just everybody remembered someone's number along the way and got a hold of their agents, and it just got to work. And everyone acts like, hey, everyone shouldn't work with each other too often. It's like, well, if they're comfortable, they should do that. But yes, eventually they'll branch out and grow up and realize I don't need this person to rely on to be good at what I do, and at the same time, well, I really do enjoy working with this guy, so yeah, it's going to be a running joke that we work together a lot. And
television, like movies and like all entertainment, is a very incestuous family. Everybody will eventually meet up. Everybody will eventually work against each other, and sometimes I kind of like it when they have the previous past, because then you can kind of draw a line to the past, and I kind of enjoy that.
It definitely makes a difference, because I mean, you want to at least have something to go on, and it also makes it easier for you to see their range as a performer, how they've evolved.
Yeah,
like this time, instead of playing minions or heroes, now they're playing opposite, antagonizing each other. That's fun. And other times they'll just sneak it in, and it's not just to sell tickets, it's also just kind of as an irony kind of role.
Right. Yeah. Kind of pay tribute a little bit.
Like, you're not going to remember the movie Dark Knight Rises, but you might remember, if you're a fan of the show Prison Break, that, hey, didn't one of the prison guards end up playing a warden in that? I see what they did there, those sneaky guys.
And what's his name? William Fichtner, who's in Prison Break, is in The Dark Knight.
There you go.
In the cold open.
The most memorable death scene in the entire body count Latin movie.
Gets a grenade in his mouth. Quality cinema.
Oh, God. Don't get us started on Christopher Nolan. We'll get so much hate mail.
I love Christopher Nolan, but...
Oh, I love Christopher Nolan on a good day.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All? Sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, Brocher's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time. Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We may talk about video games, music. Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Yes.
I am the master storyteller of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers, the Google Play, Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ. We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair say all that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we'll go end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this movie.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be a
did you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our queue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-last plot holes or gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zamenhof. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zamenhof, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zamenhof, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zamenhof.
Hi everybody, it's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything. Pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant, 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The two lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VD Clinic Pod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VD Clinic Pod. Or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
We now continue with our program.
Thought you weren't as big on The Dark Knight, so that's why I kind of started that way.
No, I love Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. I don't enjoy Dark Knight Rises at all.
Yeah, no.
There's like maybe 30 minutes in that 2.5-hour movie that I think are salvageable. But
right.
Mostly it's like, this is how you end? Really? You had all this time and this was the best you could do? Oh, all right. Well, fair enough.
I guess. Oh, God. And I think that's just a testament also, because this is the same year as Dark Knight, where everything's getting edgy and there's endless plot twists from people who have probably seen Usual Suspects one too many a time. And I just got to hand it to them. They really didn't feel like they were drawing on any other kind of crime picture or anything too often.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's a lot of Tony Soprano in there, but not a lot of like. I mean, I guess, and to the point that he's like, doing terrible things for money, for his family. They have a lot in common, but
right.
And the fact that like you're supposed to want to know what happens next week at the end of every episode because they leave you kind of wanting that. But other than that, it's a relatively kind of singular thing that doesn't really. I mean, it takes like somewhat influences and it takes kind of stylistic cues, but really it is for all 5 seasons, it's its own thing, which is so cool.
And it's such a rarity too. It's like anything else had to be very just again like relying on the other one's success, and it's like no, you don't have to do that. I mean, you can be your own deal.
And that's the benefit of being on AMC, which nobody was watching at the time.
Did you know how they got the pitch?
I do not recall. Do you know?
Yeah, in Men in Hard Times, Men in Hard Times, with which pretty much covers all the edgy shows: NYPD Blue, Sopranos, Breaking Bad, and even The Shield. It talks about how this came about from AMC noticing that some of the highest rated stuff was on their channel was movies like Falling Down and even the Death Wish, stuff that lowbrow. So it just got to that point where it's like, we want something kind of similar to that. And I do think Falling Down's an interesting parallel if Defense actually spent time with his family as opposed to going on a rampage.
Yeah.
And actually,
I mean, they both have breakdowns, so it's kind of fitting.
Right.
But his is more kind of centralized in the single day, whereas Walter White breaks down over the course of 5.5 seasons.
Right. Even causing an airplane crash.
That's probably the best moment in the entire series, because I saw that moment and I was like, okay, we're doing something different here. This is going to have some serious ramifications. And in the 3rd season premiere, the season after the plane blows up, they have the survivors, or not the survivors, but the family of the people that died in the plane crash. And they're talking to the high school assembly in the gym. And somebody says, I looked outside and on my roof was a seat, and there was still half a person in there, and it was being played for laughs.
Oh God,
Like it was
yeah.
the darkness of it, and
Mhm.
I was losing my mind. Going, oh my God, this is something I've never seen before. I love this so much.
That, and I mean, you never would have thought they would have even had the stones to even want to go there. You know, after trying to be as plausible as they could, and not even be as. I mean, they don't even take too big of a step from Sopranos, where it seemed like everybody had to have a very cheesy sounding nickname. It was like, you know, this one, it was just very, very dry, very, very, just like, I'm not sure how I should feel. I got to keep watching. You know, it's just very, and just nightmares and utter daydreams at the start, where filmed in such a very dream escapade kind of look. And you're like, I know that's going to lead to something. They're not just yanking our chain, being random, you know, high on drugs for real. They planned this out, and paralleling this and Better Call Saul. Which is your favorite? Do you feel like Saul breaks the rarity of being one of the best prequels of all time, or is it just good but not as good as the original that got you started? So
it's fantastic, and I think that in terms of cinematic television, I think is making kind of leaps and bounds that even Breaking Bad didn't do. But I think that in terms of just the sheer story being told and the sheer volume of amazing characters, it's really hard to top Breaking Bad. But I was never looking at Better Call Saul to be better. I was
Right.
never putting that on it to
Not
say,
legit.
okay, impress me, fuckers. Do better than that. I've
Yeah.
never done that, because I
I got-
know that if I do that, I'm just going to be sitting there the whole time going, they think they're so much better. Oh yeah, well the other show did this and you didn't do this. Like it's unfair to the show.
Yeah,
But
so
it's
you
an
didn't-
amazing series.
Yeah,
But
so you-
Breaking Bad is still better.
So you didn't get your tomato throwing truck ready.
No, I throw turnips. That's different.
Oh, okay.
Tomatoes leave a lot of stains, and turnips are they're much more conducive to being wiped off. So,
Damn.
just thinking practically. You know?
Yeah, true. Oh God. More or less, I gotta hand it to everybody here for even just daring to just go in the most atypical direction, not in terms of just casting and even the writers they brought aboard, but also just like just how they would even start. You're like, that's so non-linear. It's perfect. You know, anyone else would have probably gotten too messy and not been able to rebound as much. And you can tell they whatever was going on in those pitch meetings, they were going all the way around the room and seeing, you know, the minute I lose your attention, that's going in the garbage. I'm gonna go on to the next idea.
For a show that they didn't have, like when they started, they had no idea where it was going, and to be that in the dark about what your actual plans are, and to put across like I think it's 80 episodes maybe,
At
where
least,
there's only like maybe 2 or 3 that are kind of substandard, and in television, especially lately, that is a rarity. Even with less episodes in seasons, to not have an end plan or an end game, that's the actual word. End plan is not a word. To not have an end game and to feel so self-assured that when you're watching it, you're thinking, well, I can't wait to see what this leads to, when they had no idea sometimes. That is probably its greatest accomplishment.
And it always blows your mind too, because you think at least you got the beginning and end, and you just got to fill in the blanks in the middle. And sometimes, yeah, they'll almost always say in the special features of some show, we didn't know the first 3 episodes is like, and you just think, oh well, you did it, you know, every episode. I thought that was, you know, the game plan from the beginning. It's like, no, we're just experimenting. It's like, geez.
They had no idea when they thought that they were going to kill Jesse in the 2nd season.
Oh no.
And apparently, at one meeting, Vince Gilligan said to Aaron Paul, "We need to get your measurements for your coffin." And I think that he said it kind of like, maybe we will, maybe we won't, but like literally not having any idea if they would do that. And then if you watch the entire series, spoiler alert, Jesse makes it to the end, but he's also the emotional kind of linchpin of the series.
Right.
And
He's
to
always
have
been-
that character that you were so ready to fridge and then turn them into kind of like this big beating heart, I think says a lot of not just the casting and not just kind of how good the show is, but just the sheer quality of the material that you could do that.
And it's definitely one of those, even if you see people try to do it now, it's like, I don't see how you can do it as good as that. You know, it's just that it's so unfair to them because, you know, everything should be judged on its own accord. But it's like with these guys, I mean, they had to not only just, you know, experiment, but also, like you say, just like, really measure how the character was at that point in the story and then say, I don't think the show's going to be as good without this person versus that. I think we can actually make that character evolve and make the rest of the show mind-blowing as a whole. Just because
it's the job of a quality showrunner to assess what they have and on the drop of a dime know who has to go and who should stay. It's kind of it's like it's basically a sixth sense that either you have it or you don't.
Exactly.
And Vince Gilligan, flying by the seat of his pants, clearly has it.
Maybe
Because
he
I don't
even
think
has,
anybody outstayed their welcome.
Yeah, maybe even had 10 senses, you know, because it's just, we'd seen, you know, angry families and dysfunctional stuff before, either in sitcoms or briefly seen, you know, shows and dramas, and to have, you know, Skylar in this unhappy, what seemingly possibly arranged marriage, I guess, you know, with this man who, you know, Walter, who convinces himself that you know, he's doing it for this versus that, and then at the end of the day, you pretty much just find out he's just so full of it. You know, he's just he's so blinded by, he's been doing it so long that there's no telling what he'll do next. He's just so abrupt and random. And to have Gus, you know, as this, you know, Tex-Mex version of, you know, Chick-fil-A, you know, just going around and being ruthless, and then you find out why he got to be ruthless because he was bullied so much as a kid. That's just earth-shattering as well. I'm
glad you mentioned Skylar, because she is probably the most difficult character in the series, just in terms of as an audience member for the first like 3 seasons. I think what you're supposed to be doing is wondering, why won't she support her husband? Why is she so difficult? And then by the time you get to season 4, you realize, oh, he's actually a murderer, and he's going to end up being somebody absolutely despicable. We should have been saying this entire time, go away. Leave him, take the kid, and go for yourself, for your family, flee. And to have that kind of dynamic where it flips not only how the character is portrayed, but how you're supposed to process how you feel about a character. And she goes from having all these think pieces on the internet, why I don't like Skylar, to why did Skylar stay with him? God, she's such a why would she do that? And it's like, well, I mean, come on. That's the whole arc of what she's doing.
Exactly. And I without knowing about it and just binging it all back to back, I knew, you know, they're doing it for a reason, you know, that they're, and so many people, of course, unfortunately, like to just look at a show and act like it's black and white, and it's like, no, it's not that simple, where she complains and he works all day and then says, I'll make it better. No, it's not even that simple. It's just basically they're all depending on each other, and then they're realizing I need to depend on him less because he's just a animal and he's gonna do something
like
illegal.
Anna Gunn, who is outstanding, and that helps. That really helps make that character more palatable in the beginning. Like when she cheats on him in season 2.
Yeah, with the
you're supposed to think, well, how could you? Why would you do such a terrible thing? And then by the time you get to like season 5, you're like, I would have cheated on him every single day.
Exactly. And it didn't help that, the other guy who she's working with was, a doctor who's used to getting close to the patients. So it's like she got played by the people she should have been able to trust and rely on. It's like, she can't, who can she trust besides her nosy sister and her douchebag, in-law,
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, Hank, the DA agent, just goes like the first 3 seasons, you're like, oh my god, will you please be quiet? You're the awful uncle who stands in the corner, makes fart jokes, no one talks to except the other in-laws.
I have uncles like him, the kind of people that will come up to you when you're at a gathering, put their arm around your shoulders, which you tell them specifically, please don't do that, and they'll do it every single time just because they can. And they'll lean in close to you and go like, let me tell you something about life, kid. That kind of guy, that prick. I know that prick very well. And that was too close to reality for me at the beginning. But as kind of you start peeling back the onion, and especially after he gets shot, and you realize, oh, he's actually kind of a good guy. Like he's doing this because he actually wants to stop bad people. That is to have what's his name, Dean Norris, to do that is kind of a real benefit in their favor.
Absolutely. And he was no stranger, to playing all just the authority figures, but it had been a long time where he actually got more than just like 2 lines like, yes, sir. And actually
he has 4 lines in Starship Troopers, but yeah.
Oh, that's true. And I'm sure he says something else on his brief recurring role on 24.
You're making issues that affected me, or something like, I don't know. I can't really think about it. You're saying shit that your butt can't cash, or stuff like that. I don't know.
He does say weird satire in a lot of other roles, but this was the one where it's like, now full throttle. Is like and by that point, like you say, building on that is like in his final moments, let alone his final seasons where he gets all serious on the manhunt, and it's like you realize he's been technically good, but like you say, is like whatever's else is happening at the job. I mean, Gomez, his partner, there's that plenty of times where they're just telling each other to just fuck off, and it's like they don't hate each other, but they're just so moody and animalistic because they're
abrasive, like very very abrasive.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of times where the lawyers are just flat out telling Hank, leave the room while I make a deal with this guy you got in the cell. But yeah, it's like, so, and even the detective played by Nigel Gibbs of the Shield fame, just asking him for a favor, and then he only takes the issue serious when he realizes, oh yeah, I do know this guy who you drew a sketch of. I had nothing better to do, and yet I blew you off, and now I shouldn't have blown you off. I actually do want to work the case with you. I think it just goes to show, like you say, it's like I had a quarter of one of those uncles, but he was just one of those, he kept kind of poking you, and you told him for the billionth time, please fucking stop. It's not, you think it's funny, and the 4-year-old in your 40-something self thinks that's cool, but no, please stop.
Well,
And
the kind of guy who will poke you, you'll say, please don't poke me, and then he'll poke you twice next time because you asked him not to.
yeah,
That is the kind of guy that he is until he reveals kind of his deeper complexities.
exactly. And by that, and you also notice almost all the time, every scene he was in, he was always holding a beer or stuff in his face, eating like a pig. And it's like from that point on, you don't see him eat or even touch a single drink from that point on. I'm not saying he doesn't, but it's like his focus is not on binging out or
Yeah. You're supposed to underestimate him, I think. You're supposed to sit there and like, he can't catch Walter because he's not competent enough. And then you realize, no, just that's just not how it is. But now we look at him differently as the episodes go on, and then you realize they haven't really written him differently. It's just what they choose to omit that they've already shown you.
Exactly. And so going back to the onion thing, that every layer is eventually stripped before you gulp it down, and it helps that it's also, it's the kind of food dish that you actually do want to see. How did they texturize that? How did they and make it that puffy? How did they even make it that just delicious? It didn't get that way overnight, and it was in such a way where it didn't feel overbaked. Pun intended.
Yeah, it feels the proper amount of baking, just the right amount.
Yeah, and it didn't help that prior to even getting into this, this was kind of like Big Lebowski, where all the potheads would talk about it endlessly, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know how much of that is, legit versus, you're addicted to it because you can relate to it, and it is definitely worth going into. At first, I thought, some of this smuggling kind of sounds a little similar to the Armenian drug train and the Shield, but fortunately, it goes an extra step. There's even plenty of times where you have to literally watch an episode 5 times to fully get it all, because there's all these other little small moments. Just like, whoa, wait, oh, that's right, that's connected to that other episode.
Yeah, and with like the Shield, is kind of like, okay, well, the risk is, the danger is, what if they get caught? And here is, what if they get caught, and let's unravel it and have one little shoe drop in every single episode, but not tell you how the shoe is dropping. So you kind of have to analyze, so if this falls, what falls with it?
Totally.
And you kind of have to piece it together, and you realize that the show is basically a sweater, and Vince Gilligan pulls the loose thread and slowly, with every single episode, draws it out more, and it just keeps on just going way up to the chain until there's nothing left.
Exactly. It's never broken to the point where it needs a little extra knitting together. And I do agree. It is basically the shoe is like, and when it's finally done, it finally, it stomps down on the ground saying, that's it. And
this is the no more. That's it. Done.
And Saul is basically the shoelace, and how it even got to be part of that giant shoe. That is Breaking Bad.
And then later Jesse.
Yeah, and it just was such a pleasant surprise. And I talked about this with the previous commentators. It's just how when they announced these, it just felt like, okay, the actors are doing it. They're already finding bigger success. It feels like you're gasping at straws, and it's like, lo and behold, it's like, no, it's. And Gilligan just to defend it is like, the only story I didn't tell was Jesse's. Is like, he kind of just gets thrown out in the last episode. The only
you realize
complaint he got.
If you to those who haven't seen El Camino, go watch it now, because I'm going to say something about it that I don't want people to know ahead of time. Okay, are you ready? I'm going to give you 3, 2, 1. Okay. When I heard that they were making El Camino, my first thought was, but the show ends with Jesse, like, we know he's okay. And then I realized when El Camino started, oh, that's not really an ending. That is saying we have no fucking idea what's going to happen to this guy. He could drive across the state and then get shot in the back of the head by somebody that's been following him the whole time. We have no idea.
Exactly.
His story has not even really begun yet.
You could have some other parole guy we never heard about just stop him and say, hey, that car's stolen. What you doing there, camper?
It's not an epilogue. It is really just the extra hour and 45 minutes of the finale, now that Walter White is dead.
Absolutely. And it does take you a while to look at the visuals and realize, holy shit, I understand why people are calling this a neo-Western.
Oh, it's amazing. Like, if that movie was put out in theaters, I would have seen it at least twice, just to see those visuals on the big screen. It's one of the most impeccably shot movies of that year. And that it was shot basically on a TV budget and by basically a TV crew. And the fact that I have images of that movie in my head as clear as some of the images and stuff like a Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life, which is the most amazing looking movie I've ever seen. Like, that's an accomplishment.
Malick's a good
You need
parallel.
to know what you're doing to do that.
Yeah. I mean, and it had to be that way. It had to be just to the point where you're like, whoa, it has to feel out of this world, because that's how these characters are. They're just so dazed, but they're not confused. They're just, now is like, where do we go? And and it just as much time being put to that versus again scheduling, production management, all that, that does say a lot. It really does. And
it makes you think that if they had 20 days to shoot every episode instead of like 8, if every single episode had the shooting schedule of El Camino, it might be the greatest looking television show to ever be made.
they definitely could build on that. A lot of these guys I noticed later worked on stuff like Homeland, which definitely has a lot of similar breakdowns and quiet moments, then followed by the gotcha, and and people think, oh, it's a CIA, it's a spy show, isn't it action packed? It's like, yeah, but only by like the 5th or 10th episode. The other stuff is all psychological breakdown and nightmares, and which this also has, just moments where you're like, whoa, okay, how did they get there? And then you remember, oh, that's right, I know I've seen this before. It definitely has moments of deja vu that you get from a dream. It's like,
yes.
I feel like I've been here before.
It deepens it, and it makes it kind of like a rich tapestry where you get details maybe not in the order that you want them, but in the order that they need you to get them. And then that kind of realization when you realize, oh, I was primed for this. It's something that is that is very unique to television that I don't think movies can really do, simply because you can't like spend the first 20 minutes putting a bunch of hints in and then pull all those off by hour 45. That's just not how it works. But if you have 8 hours, you can layer it.
Essentially it. And time settings aside, I mean, movies too often just get in production hell and get political, and I don't mean in terms of the actual politics, I mean in terms of we want to show this versus that. Studio stuff is like what the studio wants versus what the filmmaker wants versus what the talent wants to be in.
Yeah. TV, there's simply too much going on to nitpick it. There's not enough time to do that. Like you can nitpick like the big overarching details, but ultimately you have a 50-page script that needs to be shot in 1/8 the time of your average feature film. And there's really no time to, if you got it and it doesn't really look great, like you can go back and maybe do a few pickups, but that's the best you can do. Because you're on next week. We already have the commercials. You are on.
Right. And the advertising, sponsorships, all been paid. You can't do this over, $2 million later.
You can't call the network and go, oh, sorry, we don't have that episode for you next week. Can you push it back a week? Like, no, that's not how it works. But movies, you can do that anytime you want.
Right. And it's basically the markets are definitely a reason why everybody just either gets it or doesn't. And that includes behind the scenes. Like, and it's very flattering to just kind of also see how, this was coming around this time where everything was being fixed digitally, but you can tell, something wrong could have happened and they would have shot it perfectly, no problem.
Yep.
And redone it. Yeah, no problem. We'll get it. As opposed to, can't invite that actor to come back. We got to just find a dubbing actor who doesn't sound at all like him, or have their voice be on a computer screen digitized.
TV is basically, oh, we don't like what happened in that scene. Okay, that's nice. It's on air on Tuesday. All right, well.
Right. As long
show
as it
goes on.
As long as it's not going to get an FCC complaint, we're cool with that. And I mean, we don't need Spielberg to tell us, please, just give it a PG-13.
Yeah.
I think I do. Don't you also love how they were always the actors were always the most animated at the award show, followed by Vince Gilligan, appearing on Colbert as final episode. It was just always just so wild seeing how they would embrace it, and everyone kind of knew who they were, regardless of seeing it. Enough people had talked about it, described it to their coworkers. My parents know about it.
I'm sure that it is like when they started, it was probably like we're sitting here in New Mexico, and we're making this show so far away from the network that nobody can really tell us what to do. So it's kind of like going to summer camp.
Totally.
And then like around season 3, maybe season 4, it's like, oh, we're the greatest show on television. You would think that that would kind of like get to their heads or affect them,
You would
and
think.
that's just not the case. Like, if anything, that kind of emboldened them to do more weird stuff.
Yeah, excuse me, and I definitely think that's it. So many people are just used to either complaining about what's not there or going to just the routine, typical formulas, and uh, giving up their cable box, and now just finding anything on a streaming site or at the clearance section of their store they'll find. But this was definitely one of those. It's like, hey, you may not be all that into crime, but this is gonna impact you. This is gonna leave a dent on you in a good way. And I think it helps that it feels mostly timeless, especially with the black and white flashbacks and everything, and just limited even cell phone usage. Just most of the time
Well,
they're using
and that
landlines.
it's almost like a period piece.
Yes.
Because especially now it all exists, because you have to establish, well, this is X amount of years before this happened. So once you say to people, oh, the show starts in 2008, then you stop looking at kind of like the signifiers of when this was made. And you kind of realize, okay, well, time is not going to unfold the same way that it would in real life. So it's not like this is 2008, the next season airs in 2009, so that's when the next season takes place, because there's like 5 seconds between each season.
There's 5
and each season
seconds
unfolds in a different amount of time. But
Right.
once you're established as, well, this started in 2008, so that's why everybody has flip phones, then kind of past that point, there's not really a lot of like contemporary pop culture references. There's not really a lot of music cues that kind of rely on that time, and it does kind of keep it kind of evergreen.
Yeah, that is also true. Like, and everybody, the references, especially the pop culture stuff, is mostly kept to the stoners, like Skinny Pete and all those guys, and even Jesse, and the serious lawyer guys are all like, only Saul's like the one who will even mention older TV stuff. But yeah, it's like everyone else is just often just using more common catchphrases or
and it's stylized, so they don't really like quote movies or anything like that. It's kind of like, we got to
Never
get
hear
the
about
best
that.
hard-boiled dialogue that we can. And even like to speak to like the pop culture stuff, like frequently they'll use songs from the 60s and 70s.
Yes.
But what they'll do with it is they'll use them in an ironic way, in that you'll hear like a John Denver song as somebody's getting beaten to death, and it plays that with the inherent irony of it.
Yeah.
And that it makes it more unnerving that it's not, da 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 dun. It's a pleasant song that you kind of remember from the 70s that was on AM radio, but you don't really place it. And it makes you more uncomfortable if you put those scenes in like physical jeopardy or violence.
For
which is something that-
millennials or out of touch people, just turn subtitles on. They'll tell you what's playing, and you can do your research from there when your parents fill it in.
It's something that has kind of a root in like Tarantino that goes back to like Reservoir Dogs, where you have the stuck in the middle with you scene where Michael Madsen's cutting a guy's ear off, and the song it makes it more horrifying because it doesn't match what you're seeing.
Absolutely.
And then every time you hear that song afterwards, all you can think about is the guy getting his ear cut off.
Mm-hmm. And they've made good use of also just some independent bands as well. There was one song, I always forget the band, but at one point, and the episode name is even the same name, they have a song just playing twice in the episode that says something is signifying exactly that.
Like for me, the most memorable one is A Horse with No Name, which is about wandering in the desert.
Yeah.
And that's where all the people get buried in Albuquerque.
There you go.
And even the episode name was Caballo Sin Nombre, which is horse with no name in Spanish.
So there you go. And it's definitely, they were doing a lot of on filming in New Mexico, so there you go. They took advantage of the location, had it, but actually
entirely
also,
shot there. All of it shot now.
Yeah, and had made sure that it actually had something to do with the story, as opposed to, well, it's just conveniently filmed here. It's like, no, it was planned that way, and it was coordinated that way, and like you say, it's like there's a reference within a reference within another 500 different references.
I think it's because we don't think of New Mexico as a particularly populated place, and that it's far enough into kind of like the middle ground of the United States that if all this crime is happening and all these drug kingpins are murdering people, you could kind of understand why it would take law enforcement so long to get to that, because they don't want to drive all the way out there. Nobody does. And it keeps the story isolated, so you don't have to worry about really the outside world kind of coming in and intruding upon it. But it also helps explain why all these people are being murdered and he's not being hunted by cops every single second of his life.
Exactly. There's a reason for him just being out in the middle of nowhere, and no one heard or saw anything. There weren't many witnesses. And you also see a lot of, crossover people who clearly are from California. I mean, the one guy of the other who Saul attacks with his attack ad, is definitely a Texan. So you get all these other cultures that are intertwined that definitely do cross over into that state in real life. Right. And it makes it plausible. It's like, okay, no wonder these guys all hate each other. They're not only not from the same area or culture, but they also they were always going to hit a nail in the road, just because they're just so unlike each other. They should never even cross paths. They should have just kept on driving past.
And the ingenious part is that I don't think I've ever heard anyone in my entire life, and I've been around adults a long time, I don't think anyone's ever said, I just got my money, I'm going to retire, and I'm going to move to Albuquerque. That's not where people go.
No.
Albuquerque's kind of where you go when your first and second plans didn't come through. That's where you end up as a science teacher.
Exactly.
When your life didn't go the way you wanted it to. No offense to people in Albuquerque. I don't mean any disrespect, but I think that's kind of what's being inferred.
I got a little of that information, as well as just kind of, I mean, it's also just so atypical. Like, when you think, oh, science teacher, there's very little stuff in the classroom. And even then, there's very little focus on even the actual students. And same thing with, Saul. Even though he's a lawyer, it is not filmed like a typical lawyer show. There's even one episode where he's actually causing problems for the judge and the other opposition but it's but you feel like you're actually in the audience chamber looking at it, and you can't see what they're doing, which is exactly how it's meant to be. You're like, yeah, I don't know what he's doing, but this case is getting thrown out because he's fucked it up for
and
the other side.
The iconography of Albuquerque is not something that you've seen in a lot of movies or TV shows.
No.
Like, most movies and TV shows shot in LA or New York. So you can't really do anything that's terribly creative with New York or with Los Angeles. Like The Sopranos, the smart thing that they did was they said, we're going to go to Jersey, tell that story, because Jersey's not really in a lot of movies.
Right.
Especially not the crime of Jersey. But Albuquerque, I can't remember the last time I saw a movie that was set in Albuquerque, or especially a TV show.
Only afterwards, you saw stuff like Halt and Catch Fire, that was it.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing kind of the rich upscale, urban version of New York's crime on like Power. We're seeing Wyoming cowboy related crimes. Yes, on Yellowstone, which also has kind of a cool, there's a brief cancer scare with one of the protagonists, but it feels like a tribute versus just such a still.
I've never actually seen it, but my parents love it, so
I think
gotta say something.
It's definitely a good neo-noir there, especially if you like, again, Holding, what's the robbery movie with Chris Pine? It's by that guy.
Oh, Hell and High Water.
Yes, Hell and High Water, which is set
That's right, because it's Taylor Sheridan, right?
Right.
Who also did Sicario and Wind River, which are awesome movies.
Yes, if you love those, I don't think you'll be disappointed with that one. But like you said, uh,
Hell and High Water.
I don't know why I can't say it today. Hell and High Water is like, yeah, that was filmed in New Mexico and meant to be like part of a Texas area, but yeah, it was wild how, like you say, is like the filming industry opens up there, as well as just more movies and shows being set there, because it's just not a culture we've ever really cinematically seen.
It's so strange that you would probably the filming board of the state was probably like, you're going to shoot here? That's great. We're going to give you all these tax breaks. And then they probably found out, oh, you're going to murder that many people, huh? Oh, okay. And then people started coming out and like, can we shoot our movie here? And they're like, kill all the people you want.
You're right.
It's like how Rabun County, Georgia, where Deliverance was filmed, became a popular tourist destination after Deliverance came out. And it made me think, did you people see Deliverance? Like,
Right.
nothing in that movie is telling you, come here. It's fun here. It's telling you, stay out. Don't ever come here.
There's definitely a haunted house equivalent for a lot of these places. It's like, seriously, you want to waste your vacation day driving here for that reason?
And, you know, like the sodomy, like, that's not fun.
Life is too short to go to a place because you remember a torture thing in some work of fiction. It's just like,
But the river's really pretty. Yeah, okay, but I don't want to get sodomized by hillbillies.
Exactly. Oh,
Non-hillbillies, that's okay. But hillbillies, no thank you.
not welcome here, please. And I mean, I don't even know how the housing area is there. I mean, when I hear of cheaper areas to live, I hear people moving to Atlanta. I hear of people saying I'm going to buy a mansion in Miami. That's it. You know, I don't hear, hey, yeah, I need to come down to New Mexico.
If I ever hear I'm going to go to Albuquerque, I'll say, "Are you sure you don't mean Arizona? I think you're talking about Scottsdale, right?" No, Albuquerque. Okay, whatever you say.
They're by each other. They're not similar though. Same
No
thing
offense to Scottsdale, by the way.
Yeah, or even Oklahoma for that matter.
Well, nah, I'm just kidding.
Awful radio, I'm told though. Nothing but awful, angry people shouting on the radio.
All right, then I take it back. Screw you, Oklahoma.
There you go. So I think, and I gotta ask you, it would be criminal, pun intended, if I did not ask you who your favorite and least favorite character was. And once again, all these characters are well acted. It's just a matter of how to. It was just the most fascinating because, and yes, guys, we're not glamorizing the villains. We get it. We know what the show's about.
I'll glamorize them. I love villains. I love killing people. It's fun. My favorites are. I mean, it's man, that's tough. It's I'm gonna cheat and say it's a three-way tie. First, Saul, just because when he first showed up, it's Bob Odenkirk, who was one of my heroes, comedic heroes growing up. If you've never seen Mr. Show, an HBO show from the mid-90s, possibly the greatest television show not named Mystery Science Theater of that decade. So when he showed up, I was like, oh, so this is going to be a comedy role, because wasn't at that time really known for being a dramatic actor.
Yeah, I only
he
saw.
was the comic relief really for like the episodes of season 2 that he was in. And then when he comes back in season 3 and he became a regular, they really started showing kind of the darkness of him. And he was dark when he showed up, but really got to his black soul. And
he made for a very cool, just even above just his typical job title, just to where it's like you wanted to see if he or Walter were going to do something just way more outrageous first, and then
and by having Bob Odenkirk play a shifty lawyer, you already have something in your favor, because you think, oh, this is going to be like one of his characters, like the unscrupulous lawyer. And then you realize, no, it's not a gag. That's just to get you in the door. That's to kind of sell you on the premise of the character. Him kind of go nuts from there.
Right.
And then second of the three would be Jonathan Banks, of course, because now I don't think I knew his name really before Breaking Bad, but now, like, anytime he shows up, I get instantly excited. And, like, even as something as small as, like, Incredibles 2, where he has, like, maybe 6 lines, and he's
There you-
replacing a character from another movie by a different actor.
Wow.
He brings so much to that, and he's just outstanding, and to the point that, like, when they made Better Call Saul, you couldn't imagine them doing a prequel of Saul without Mike. It just wasn't to say we're gonna make the show and he's gonna be the only one that you know. I don't think that that would be kind of palatable. I think that they needed to show people it's not just him. Mike's coming back, and immediately, like, half the people that were like, "I don't really care about a prequel," were instantly like, "So how does he meet Mike? How does this work?"
Yeah,
And it's masterful.
and they you just knew without them even promising. It's like, okay, that along the way someone's gonna make an appearance. Even the most minor characters like Jim Beaver's black market weapons guys. You never would have thought that brief guest appearance on the original show would be a guy who's in a few different key episodes of Saul. And so it's like they knew that they never left the world. And like you say, like Bob, everyone's like, I never knew Bob could do that. It's like, well, I mean, he wrote some of the most outrageous sketches on SNL for Chris Farley and other people, and
Wrote him with
was on
Conan
it.
O'Brien.
Yeah, Conan, and Conan can be dark if you want him to, and just several different, Adult Swim collaborations, and then even movies like Nebraska. He's like, yeah, he always could go there. Many comedians can, you just gotta let him. I mean, look at Richard Belzer as Detective Munch on all the crime shows. So he's like, it can be done. It's just, do you give the invite? And I think, building on your point, yes, it's like he was already going to be able to pull off that role. That's why clearly they knew him enough to even cast him to begin with. And like you say, he was to get the character in the door. And same thing there with the spinoff is like he was to send the invite to say, hey, we're not like any other prequel spinoff. We're actually going to bring a lot to the world. We're going to show not only the origin of everybody, but be our own cool thing. I mean, introducing us to the most despicable boss on the planet, Fabian, as Hamlin is like,
And it puts this it kind of refocuses kind of what Breaking Bad was about, in that when you start watching it, you don't know that it's going to be the story of a man who is going to become a villain. You think that it's going to be the story of a man who's trying desperately not to become the villain. And he really kind of gives up around season 3 and kind of like, okay, I'm the bad guy now. The question is, how bad do I get? And
Right.
with Better Call Saul, we know how this ends up. We know how who he becomes. So instead of the bait and switch of Breaking Bad, the question is not so much does he become a villain, but how long does it take him to become the villain, and then how long is there going to be between the two series to kind of like bridge them.
Exactly. And I mean, you knew, I mean, he had nothing to lose. Clients, if not friends, crappy, sibling rivalry, and
Yeah, because he's pathetic when the show starts.
Absolutely.
Like, he's already a failure, and what they're trying to do is trying to get you to actually be on his side, despite the fact that he can't really start as a good person. He needs to start as somebody who clearly shows signs that he's willing to put aside his principles, if he has any, to do what he thinks needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And it's ingenious the way that they kind of ratchet that up and make you really think like, okay, well, he's actually a good brother and all this stuff, when really not that great a brother, but you start identifying with him despite the fact that he's a villain when you realize, oh, his brother's a shittier brother than he was.
Exactly. And I mean, Michael McCain from This Is Spinal Tap, I don't think anyone would have thought, wow,
Outstanding. So good. Oh, I love him so much.
And just how all his wackiest quirks is like, it sounds silly on paper when you're telling it to people, but it's like, hey, if you can buy people people making drugs for atypical standards, you can buy that this guy, everyone's known someone who said something very loopy, very out there. You're like, wait, what? you think an electric current is giving you cancer? Wait, what? You know, stuff like that.
I have crazier family members. I don't think that it's that weird, but it's weird in the fact that you don't see anybody like that on TV. I mean,
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm
even
going for.
shows like anything that David E. Kelly does, where everybody has to have a weird quirk or a weird kink. I don't even think they got to that point. Like Boston Legal went on for 5 years. I don't think anybody had an aversion to electromagnetic waves.
No, the most they had was like, wow, you're gonna win a case that way? Well, that's never been done. I don't know how that would even work. And but we've always liked seeing just very, very weird lawyers or just other people is like, and to build on the quirks and even give life to that quirk outside of just even the character was definitely a rare feat. I mean,
yeah,
I don't even see how. I mean, when you building back on Jimmy, I mean, you see him just doing, it's like, okay, so he's like us. He's been frustrated and just let out his anger just at an abandoned corner block. Okay, cool, whatever. But then to see him actually, he's like, okay, wow, he just flat out gave up. That's all he knew was how to be just petty, and then actually use it as part of a career. And then you saw why all the other awful people he's worked with only gave him just more fuel for the fire. Where it's like, you know what? Yeah, you're just encouraged me to just kick your ass in court. Now it's not even about the money or even making a living. Everyone knows me as ruthless, and I'm just going to even put it in the ad with the amateur college students who I'm giving crappy direction to. You know,
It's an arc similar to Walter White in that it's people realizing what they're good at, even if what they're good at is not something that we should be proud of being good at.
Yeah, but it's even weirder though. He doesn't even deny it. He's just like, at first he'll, play a few tricks on, Hamlin and keep secrets from Kim before she becomes kind of part of his alter ego. You would have never thought, okay, he'll date her. I never thought, wow, they're actually going to be a couple. Okay. Some of his dirty tricks in court. How does this affect her? How is it? And since we only are a season away, there's no telling where. All we know is somewhere along the way he's gonna probably lose her, because she's never appeared on Breaking Bad. So what happened there?
It's probably not going to be pretty. I can tell you that. I haven't seen season 5 yet, so I have no idea what the trajectory is this year. But I have a feeling that Kim might not make it out alive. Hope that's not the case, because I don't want to see anything bad happen to her. I hope that they just have a really unpleasant breakup and she just leaves and ghosts him forever. I hope that's how it goes, but I have a feeling that it's not. I have a feeling that that's going to tip him over even more.
I shouldn't spoil anything for you, but I think you got nothing to worry.
All right, well, that's good. And then my third favorite is, of course, Giancarlo Esposito as Gus Fring. Possibly the greatest villain on TV in the last 20 years.
Oh, absolutely.
Just outstanding. And like I've been a fan of his since Do the Right Thing, really. Like when he played Buggin' Out, which is one of my favorite kind of supporting performances in a Spike Lee movie. And I don't recall ever seeing him as an out and out villain before. But the way that he plays it is so cold
kind of
and so calculating.
Character.
Yeah, like he has like some hints of menace, but never to the point of like, this is the most evil man on the face of the earth who can slit a guy's throat with a box cutter and then go upstairs and make fried chicken.
Exactly.
Like that to be that cold is just precise.
Entirely. I've seen him do wonderful guest spots on various shows. I've seen him be a recurring lawyer on Law and Order. I've seen him, be a detective related by blood on Homicide, and then he's been criminal roles in Trading Places and Fresh, but those were by reputation, not like you say, where it's like, I feel like he could kill someone today.
And it must have been like, we have this character, we have no idea how to cast him. He probably came in and they were like, oh, thank God. Thank God we found him. We did not write this for him, but we know that he can bring this across. And now he's on every single show that is on television right now, playing villains.
And he's always kind of one-upping his villains. It was great seeing him on Revolution. It was great seeing him on, Mandalorian, obviously. But then it's even the same thing with all the other guys. It's awesome when you see Aaron Paul be comedic relief in a movie. It's great when you see Cranston also playing an bizarre anti-hero or villain, and it's all to the same the rest of the ones. Like Bob Odenkirk has a movie that's described as John Wick meets Falling Down coming out by the creators of the latter, and so it's like, wow, everyone's
and John Wick, the guy who wrote John Wick.
That's what I mean, yeah. And so it's like to see that much, all these guys be just even putting their heads together in the creative realm is just an interesting marketing gimmick now too.
And I mean, like with Giancarlo, in the same year he played Gus Fring, a member of the Empire, and Lex Luthor in the same year. That's insane.
Yeah. Especially Lex Luthor. It's like, damn, really? Okay. And
like when they cast him, I was like, he can't possibly do better than Clancy Brown. Like that's the baseline.
Yeah,
But he brings such a comic edge to it, which is important because it's a comedy. But he's so good. I wish he was in it more, but I'm pretty sure he has enough work to do that he doesn't exactly need it.
He's apparently on The Boys as well, and I gotta catch up on that and Godfather of Harlem. But yeah, it's just whenever he shows up, I'm glad that everyone knows who he is, and to have seen him do awesome guest appearances and just indie films and.
Yeah, before he was that guy, I know that guy, and now he's Giancarlo Esposito. Okay, cool.
Totally,
which is awesome. That's the fact that you have this guy who's been a reliable character actor for more than 2 decades, and to have been in so many movies and so many TV shows, playing never giving in like half an effort, and now when he actually know his name, that's amazing. That's kind of something that only TV can really do.
I think it also just helps that these guys, whenever you even see them in an interview, the cameras are on and they're not on set, but they're still just even letting loose, just their game for whatever they're being asked. They're just so lively. There is no calming down. They are game even when something. They act like it's the next audition. Like I've seen Carlo break into song on one of the late night shows. I've seen he has
a lovely voice.
It's a great voice, yeah. And Cranston, be game with all the various comedic stuff. I've seen.
Now he's selling Mountain Dew.
Yes, and Bob Odenkirk just always he was on every SNL reunion special. It's just always talking about the people he grew up knowing and writing for. So it's just like. It eventually is like all these guys just end up just they're so invaluable, and it's just even Esposito especially just has always done just the most unusual even guest appearances in movie roles, including Ali.
He's tremendous in Ali.
Yeah, even lesser seen crime movies that no one saw, like Phoenix and. I remember some of his guest appearances even on Nash Bridges and NYPD Blue. Just each time just playing the most unusual kind of person you could even think of, and then the list goes on to other stuff like Living Single and Chicago Hope. So it's just like he also always had a lot of his independent films are fortunately able to be found, and he's been in enough other movies where like Smoke and Usual Suspects where you're like, I think I remember his role in that. I want to watch it again now and then focus on him. It's so they all have enough in their corner, but they're hardly just lucky and everything or right place, right time. It's like someone did seek them out and knew about them, and they weren't just casted just because they were good for the roles, but also just because they could, if they wanted to even just change the character midway through shooting, they could have done that. No problem. No storming off to the trailer. They would be like, you know what? Let's try that.
Yeah.
Especially because these
you got to
characters.
cast first for a presence, and then kind of like then the character will follow.
With the presence, and then they were also they loved. They were in love with the roles. They were if you wanted it to change it just within 5 seconds, that they'd be willing to experiment with that. That's rewarding to an actor to take on a challenge. As long as you tell them that in advance, it's like, expect the unexpected. And it's such a shame that it just wasn't always as commonly done. It seemed to always just be, here's what the network's saying, and we're only worried about the first two names we get, and that's all we need. Airing tonight after, whatever depressing news show. I think, if anything, this is going to be. I hope they start teaching this show in certain film schools. It's like, why does this appeal to you? It's not just good because it's great. It got that way to begin with, and instead of second guessing or listen to the commentaries or any other podcast about the show, why not you just study even just a simple scene? Why does it have your attention? Because why does it never not have your attention? It is so just there's never any lack of life, and even the quietest moment there is never any too much, and even the most excessive moment. It's a well blended milkshake, and it's one that you can have without getting constipated. It's great.
Yeah, just aesthetically, it's the kind of show where you can take some of the best episodes and just watch them for the cutting, or just watch them for the lighting, or watch them for how scenes are played out.
Absolutely.
And you can actually learn a lot about the vernacular of cinema, even though it's television and they have less time and they have less resources. It's still the same basic principles that are being put into play, and it all comes down to how you use those principles.
Absolutely. They didn't just even they were definitely taking note even after the simplest things that they were doing. And I mean, the soundtracks are definitely worth checking out, and it's not the same again as watching it with the visual, but some of it is even more interesting. It's like, wow, now that it's a whole extra depth, when you add the visual of the thing in your head to this particular track. And some of them are even just standalone. It's like, I just need a guitar riff going on in the background. And I forget the name of the guy, but it was I think he was a country musician. And who would have guessed that he would be scoring the entire show? and
he's outstanding, because it's not just like the music, though. It's like the sound design plays a lot with silences, and it plays a lot with the ambient sound of a room, or the ambient sound of the desert. And it's really a very layered kind of sound design that you kind of don't even get kind of really in blockbuster movies. It's about the spatial relationship between the characters and the environment that they're in.
Yeah, there's even other random jingles that aren't even exactly music. They're just a so-called just transition noise. And I don't think I even heard the typical overused white noise shrill, that you typically hear when, someone's been shell-shocked, and something is like that they almost always seem to play when someone's having a mental breakdown. I can't even recall any of those kinds of moments. There's even plenty of times where you see just someone's eye, or even just a totally unrelated object, just to convey that so many thoughts are racing through their head. And it definitely was plenty of storyboarding.
Oh yeah, it's not. I mean, as far as the story was playing by the seat of their pants, the craft of the filmmaking that's not. I mean, it's improvised in the sense that you don't have a lot of time, so you got to make decisions that you don't necessarily plan out. But those decisions have to still be made, kind of taking everything into consideration.
Enough
like
to work
they've
with.
been having great directors on that show since the beginning. Like Ryan Johnson was directing episodes in like season 3, and then he came back for like season 5. And this is after Brothers Bloom, but before Looper. And then he made Looper, and then came back and did another episode.
Didn't he also do the finale?
No, he didn't.
Okay.
Vince Gilligan directed the finale.
But yeah, I do recall. Yeah, I did 3 episodes, including the most bizarre one where Jesse and Walt are just distracted by a fly while they're making drugs.
That's probably my favorite episode. Simply because you could tell that as they were making it, Ryan Johnson was like, okay, so we have this lens. What can I shoot with this lens? Okay, so I have this height on the camera. What can I shoot with this height on the camera? And then you take that kind of like willing to do anything for an effect and put it together with some utterly bizarre and truly inspired writing choices, and it comes together with one of the most memorable episodes of anything I've ever seen.
Right. And again, you can say, yeah, not much happens. It's like, well, that's just it. What happens when you're prepping for a test? There's always that 1 hour or 2 hour where you're losing your shit and you're like, I don't know that I can do this. And this is exactly it. This is just reminding you, this is a test. They might not make it out of this.
Not much happens, but everything happens.
Exactly. And the Foley on the fly is also brilliantly done. It's like, it's not even in the same frame because that's no fair to wait on a film crew to wait on a fly to cooperate. There could be 2 of them for all you know. It echoes at times to where it's like, jeez, that the simplest thing is just busting their bubble for a good while. And,
yep.
It also, there's just some other dark humor that they sneak in just the most unusual placement. And it's like, but it was meant that way. It wasn't just, an actor ad-libbed and they kept it in. It was just,
right.
But yeah, there's plenty of filmmakers that have worked on this one and always beyond reliable lensers. They and it's not even the most common kind of filmmaking where, even the static shots are the most unusual. Handheld is even kept to even atypical steady cam kind of stuff. So it's like they wanted to make sure they had their own style. It's like,
it's a TV show with the sensibility of an independent film.
Yes, that is the best placement that anyone has ever said of this. Is because, yeah, I mean, I've even encountered filmmakers like, I want to make something like Breaking Bad. It's like, well, good luck, because there's no one who's going to be able to replicate that style. Even the actors and filmmakers and other stuff won't be able to replicate it because they will have by then moved on to something else that's even more startling and atypical. Is like, if anything, I dare you to just be weirder. It's just,
yeah.
That'll find an audience.
That's the ultimate lesson of Breaking Bad, is that if you trust your audience and you invest in the right people and you go in with this idea that you're going to be not just complex in the way that you show your characters, but the way that you kind of build and flesh those characters out, as long as kind of those are your main kind of values, interesting things will happen.
Absolutely. I mean, how can they not? I mean, you got the trust, you got the surface. Now, beneath the surface, you pack all the surprises, and that's the other thing with all the other shows that everyone goes, oh, that simple show, that drama show, that comedy show, that courtroom show is like, well, but here's the thing, now there's a reason a lot of people are watching and tuning into that each day, and it's not just because of the pretty faces. There's also got to be, how the crime or the dilemma is portrayed, how the gags are done, that there's clearly something. And especially with this one is like, there's so many other moments is like, and it wasn't just in the casting and how it was filmed. It was also just in how that even got just brought up, how that went from being one's imagination to being put on a paper that then got adapted. I mean, so I'm sure they definitely did a checklist of, I don't feel comfortable doing this versus I think we should swing away at that one. That's a bowling ball going down the alleyway. We can totally pull that off. It doesn't matter that no one has or hasn't done it. Let's try it. Mm-hmm. And AMC fortunately did leave them alone quite a lot. There was very few people, that are just a division of the Rainbow Corporation, which is also, part of We, Oxygen, and Sundance Channel. So it's like they we're all about is like, okay, we're experimenting, we're trying something new. We want kind of some of the same ratings as FX, if not Showtime and all those other ones. So it's like that.
Well, it helps that nobody's watching. When you have a network that nobody really considers a home for drama or a home for scripted programming,
right?
You don't have this idea of, well, we got to impress this person, we got to impress that person. It becomes, what do we have to lose? So if we fail, who's going to know? Nobody's watching.
Perfect.
And in that, you make really interesting stuff. Like, I don't think they would have ever made Mad Men if they had been doing original scripted programming for 10 years or for 5 years. That just wouldn't happen.
No.
Like, that show was rejected from every single studio, every single network.
And it's so wild, too, because Matt had some, already was in with other writers, places.
Yeah, he wrote for The Sopranos.
Right. And so it is wild how what was rejected was accepted by another network. And some of it is whoever was the executive and head of programming at the time, and the other times it's just like, was it just how they pitched it? Was it the fact that they thought, I can't sell that, the character's a douche, but they're fascinating? What was it? That's
probably a combination of all those things, but mostly just an issue of, well, nobody else is going to make this, so let's be the people that made this. Because then if this works, then people look at us and they go, that's where I want to pitch interesting things that nobody else will take.
And bless them. I hope they stop getting spoiled and do go on from here and try and do a few different things. I've heard people talk about NOS 9A42 I think it's called.
Nosferatu. Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that eventually they make shows that don't have The Walking Dead in the title. That would be nice, instead of Walking Dead 27.
I'm with you there. They're already talking about a third one, and I'm like, please only last one season and go on to something else. The zombie craze was great when Romero made it his trademark, and since then everybody, you've either gotten into the Romero camp and everything else, and it just seems like it's the same where we are with all the other genres. It's like someone did this, and then there's everything else. It's like, now it's time to just, however you write is how the show is. Just take a chance on life and try that out. And
there's merchandise to sell. There's Comic-Cons to staff. There's all those things that are kind of much more important than kind of story integrity.
Right. And we can only adapt so many comics and books to where it's like, now we got to just go back to a simple concept and then add all the other atypical stuff that is your trademark.
You have to build the universe. You have to have a franchise.
Right.
It's like, no, you really don't. Like the comic book, I don't believe has any follow-up books. I believe it was, he wrote the story, and then when he was done, he was done.
Either that or it goes on and on like a soap opera, and everyone forgets, oh yeah, they have been issuing endless issues of that.
Now the franchise is as hard to kill as a zombie. And that is, oh boy, that's fun.
It's fun. It's like telling an amazing joke 100 times. It's like, okay, now you've told it 120 times. It stinks.
I would like to shoot the franchise in the brain if I knew where their brain was.
Oh.
But I have no idea.
Maybe they're vampires and you need to take out the silver.
Well, vampires get killed with stakes. Silver's werewolves.
Oh, okay. Well, shit.
Aha! You see? Aha! I'm a nerd. I know that stuff.
I thought I was going by
I watched
Blade.
a lot of Buffy.
I was going by Blade logic, but okay. So there you go. So now, hell, if we don't have werewolves and zombies and vampires, then what's next? Virus?
Frankenstein's.
Oh, well, there you go.
Always Frankenstein's. The one thing that True Blood never got to, Frankenstein's.
Oh, jeez. I guess there just wasn't enough room in that town. Will Twin Peaks take it? I don't know. Oh, Ryan, where can we find you on the web?
Well, my podcast, the Coolness Chronicles, is on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Buzzsprout, and where can you find podcasts? I'm on Twitter at CoolnessPodRyan and Instagram at The Coolness Chronicles. Okay, so by the time you hear this episode, I will have wrapped up the original run of Mystery Science Theater, and I will be pretty deep into riff tracks.
Woo!
And if you've never heard the show before, I kind of do a deep dive pop culture history lesson that happens to be about Mystery Science Theater. And every episode we get further along in the timeline and all the way up to the present day. And by the time you hear this, it'll be probably nearing the end of our run on riff tracks. Hopefully we'll have a few special guests, and then we'll be starting up the revival, the Netflix revival, and then closing out this 3-year-long season of podcasting.
Man.
And then I have my other family, Reels of Justice, also on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Buzzsprout, and you can find us there on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram at Reels of Justice, and it's a fantastic show. We take movies and we put them in a trial setting. So we have a prosecutor, a defender, a judge, and a jury, and we try to see if a movie is guilty or innocent of being a bad movie.
And everyone, ladies and gents, you got to check it out, because I mean, he does wonderful, just an examination of everyone's career. Recently examined, all the other cross collaborations that Trace, Frank, Bill, and others have done, and as well as
we did the only podcast episode in history that I think covers the entire history of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and the franchise, and did an Abbott and Costello audio commentary in the same episode. You might say that other podcasts are better and have much more interesting things in it, but you will never find another podcast that will do that in the span of 40 minutes. I promise you that. That is my guarantee.
Exactly. Especially, let alone a commentary on why the comedians are so good. I've seen people sum up a comedy show. I've never seen anybody sum up, a commentary on a commentary. So.
Well, that's actually going to be my third show that hopefully might be dropping around the time that this episode airs, but I will keep that close to the vest because I don't want anybody to steal my concept.
Shh.
I've kind of already spoiled it on like social media, but I didn't say anything. I don't have a third show. What are you talking about?
It's all right.
What's this all about?
I got the suicide capsules to bite down on if I let something slip.
Oh, I got mine. No worries.
Well, and I'm looking forward to Reels. It'll definitely be interesting what gets prosecuted next. Thank you ever so much for being on here, and
thank you.
Diving into this maze of a show that, with more than just a Minotaur, it's got plenty of other death traps that just make it so endlessly rewatchable.
Got a Kraken. Not just a Minotaur, it's got a Kraken. Medusas, all that stuff.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up